I wore the dress my grandmother pressed into my hands the day I moved out of her house, a dress that somehow felt like permission and defiance at the same time. It smelled faintly of lavender and the kind of starch that remembers other people's weddings. My hands kept brushing the seam at my hip like it was a secret I could smooth away. People kept telling me to breathe. I did. Shallow and theatrical, because weddings are a performance, and I had spent the last year learning lines, smiles, thank yous, the right amount of gratitude to the cousin who brought cheap champagne. I am Annie. I grew up in a house where generosity came with an asterisk. My mother, Evelyn, was the sort of woman who could make an empty cupboard sound like a thoughtful sharing opportunity. She would fold her kindness around other people's lives until there was nothing left but a memory labeled, "We thought of you." My sister, Louise, my half-sister, or step-something depending on who was telling the story, was prettier in that next-door bad girl way that made people forget the small violences, the bristling little commands, the jokes that landed like reminders of not enoughness. They wore entitlement as if it were tastefully accessorized. Danny is the opposite of theatrics. He is a math problem that prefers to be solved rather than admired. Quiet, precise, loyal to the point where it becomes architecture. He met my frazzled honesty and didn't try to tidy it. He learned the map of my family the way a cartographer memorizes coastlines. He listened to the stories of missed calls and mortgaged affection, and then, 2 weeks before the wedding, took me to a lawyer's office with the same calm he uses to fix a leaky sink. "It's not dramatic," he said in the waiting room, reading the pamphlet upside down like a spy. "It's boundary work. Think of it as insurance." 2 weeks before my wedding, I watched a notary stamp ink as if it were a tiny private thunderclap. We signed a declaration that put every gift meant for me, physical gifts, cars, heirlooms, squarely under my name. It said, in plainer legalese than anything I'd seen in my family, that no transfer of these gifts could occur without my written consent, and that any attempt would have consequences not just for the item, but for future inheritance from Danny's family. I remember the way the sheet looked when the notary handed it back. The way legal language made something shapeless feel like armor. I didn't want war. I wanted a life that didn't involve explaining away someone's callousness for the social convenience of being family. But I also didn't trust the performative kindness that had been passed down like a favorite recipe, a cup of guilt, a dash of obligation, served warm. The truth had always been that kindness in my family arrived with strings long enough to strangle the giver. If the law could turn those strings into something visible, red thread against pale linen, then I would take it. Wedding planning with my mother had been a series of small bruises. She volunteered to help, and then volunteered my boundaries away. She called late at night to suggest changes, and then complained about my choices as if expressing her unhappiness were a charitable concession. At brunches, she would slide a comment across the syrup like a note. "Isn't it sweet that Louise needs a car?" And watch me smile until I dissolved into apologetic bargaining. Louise would answer with a laugh that made everyone around her complicit. She had an Instagram habit of making generosity look like a public celebration, the kind where applause for her felt preemptive and inevitable. The car was from Danny's parents. They had wrapped it in a literal bow, which is important because bows in our story are never what they seem. My in-laws tucked a key into a small velvet box and handed it to me at a rehearsal dinner, their faces earnest in a way that made me cry in the back seat on the way home. The car was practical, sensible. Danny's mother called it adulting made metallic. To me, it felt like a declaration that we were starting a life that didn't require me to tally kindness in a ledger and then hand out IOUs to people who forgot to be kind back. I remember the rehearsal, the smell of basil and candle wax, my mother congratulating me with a smile that was the same width as the memory of her saying, "I'll always make sure Louise is okay." Those words were the hinge of 1,000 small habits. That "will always make sure" meant someone else would be expected to prove their gratitude indefinitely. You learn to read patterns when you grow up inside them. I learned to look for the seam where generosity became a leash. On the morning of the wedding, time felt like wet taffy. My bridesmaids fussed with pins and vows, and my phone buzzed with the usual last-minute confirmation calls, messages from cousins, some gif of a dog in a veil. Evelyn arrived wearing a dress that had the exact posture of a woman who expects an audience. She had on the perfume she uses to soften sharp words into sugar, an olfactory sleight of hand that had worked on in-laws and acquaintances for decades. Louise came late, of course. She swept in with laughter too loud for the small bridal suite, carrying candles like trophies. She hugged me, her cheek against mine, and I felt a practiced warmth. Her skin smelled of the salon and sunscreen and a confidence that had always leaned on other people's discomfort as a foundation. She leaned over and whispered, conspiratorial, "Wait till you see what Mama did. You're gonna die. She's giving me that car. Can you imagine? I'm going to post it all night." Something in me tightened. The word giving in that sentence was a small, familiar theft. I kept my face kind. Weddings teach you a lot about how to look grateful on cue. I sipped my water and tried to convince my heart that I was being silly, that this was a family thing, a miscommunication, perhaps even a joke. But memory has a way of stacking like plates. The time she let me borrow her dress and then wore it better. The time she helped me move and left with the boxes I'd labeled as mine. The time she announced she'd take care of something that was mine and then didn't return it. It's not the big thefts that ruin you, but the relentless micro-robberies disguised as sisterly concern. I excused myself to the balcony because the world felt too small for the heft of my lungs. Danny found me there, the ribbon of his tie fluttering like a small flag. He didn't ask what was wrong. He put his hands around my face and said, "We planned for this. You'll see." There was a steadiness in his chest that somehow made panic feel like a story with a beginning, middle, and end. When we walked down the aisle, the building seemed to inhale. The congregation, our friends, our mixed-up family, watched like a jury. Evelyn stood to give a speech toward the end of the reception, the kind of speech that promises surprise and ends with a demand. I watched her hands as if they were going to do something small and then do something enormous. Louise sat beside her, bright and expectant, swiping through her phone occasionally to frame the moment for an audience of strangers. Evelyn's voice at the microphone was syrup and steel. She told stories about my childhood, which is a term she uses to select memories that make her look generous. She spoke of sacrifice and family and the importance of sharing blessings. Her eyes crinkled on the word share like it was a secret only she knew how to reveal. People laughed at the pauses she placed, the jokes she framed as humility. I felt the crowd as a tide rising around us, and inside that tide, a something like dread pooled. "And before I finish," Evelyn said, leaning into the good part, "there's one more thing. You know our family believes in helping one another. So we decided Louise is getting a car today. It's right here." She gestured with a smile that said she had orchestrated surprise and charity for maximum applause. For a second, the world misread the motion as a magical reveal. Someone in the crowd clapped, mistaking theater for generosity. I watched Louise's fingers flex, the way a cat preens over prey. But my mouth had already formed the words I had been practicing. "Thank you." Small and steady, the sentence a letter folded neat. In that heartbeat, I felt the geometry of the room shift. I thought of every time I had swallowed my own need to make room for someone else's comfort. I thought of the notary's stamp 2 weeks prior, the paper tucked like an amulet in my bag. I thought of Danny's hands in my hair in the balcony, and the way he said, "We planned for this." I walked toward the stage because some things require ownership to be claimed in public. I lifted the velvet box in my pocket like a card turned up at the end of a game. The moment felt ridiculous and holy all at once, like an altar made of paperwork. As the band played on and someone opened another bottle, I could see the anticipation in their faces, Evelyn's smile, the eager tilt of Louise's head. They were about to perform the oldest trick in our family's book, taking the narrative of generosity and using it to annex what was rightfully mine. I stepped into the light and smiled, the smile I had practiced for a year, because the world will always ask for a pretty face while you take back what belongs to you. The reception smelled like lemon trees and too sweet perfume, the kind of sweetness that hides the grit on the bottom of a mason jar. Plates clinked. The band played a slow song that made elbows touch and toes misstep, and someone had set up a montage of our lives on a projector. Baby photos, bad haircuts, me and Danny at a state park looking like two people who'd finally stopped apologizing for each other. The lights were low enough to flatter and high enough to reveal everything else. I sat at the head table, feeling at once indestructible and ridiculous. That feeling, equal parts armor and absurdity, has its own weight. You carry it like a cape and then wonder if you look ridiculous or regal. My phone buzzed. I tucked it face down because wedding etiquette apparently still demands an act of performative presence. Danny squeezed my hand. He had the look of a man who had balanced an entire life plan on the steadying sound of my breathing. We were both ready to be married and tired of being negotiated for. Then Louise's laugh cut through the low hum like a cymbal. She held up her phone toward Evelyn, and the guests clustered near the bar. All the theatricality of someone who has learned applause is currency. Her eyes shone with that particular thrill people get when they're performing generosity that benefits them. She tapped the screen, and the room watched like children at a magic trick. She posted it. An Instagram story that would vanish in 24 hours but would be immortal enough for likes. The caption was peacocking with gratitude. Mama outdid herself. New ride. Blessed. Sister, grateful. And she tagged a dozen people. The little bubble that showed her story right there on the phone's surface felt like a lit fuse. A smattering of ooze. Someone whooped. My chest tightened, not because of the car itself, but because of everything that car represented. A pattern, a history, 1,000 niceties that had been used as cudgels. I could feel the memory plates clattering in my mind, the brown paper of small betrayals, the polite thefts handed to me wrapped in concern. I didn't stand right away. I let the sound of my name being toasted wash over me like a tide. Then I stood because there is a line between letting yourself be celebrated and letting yourself be consumed. I walked to the microphone like someone walking into a courtroom in a dress, and everyone leaned in because weddings are voyeuristic small jurisdictions where people watch to see how love will adjudicate hurt. "Excuse me," I said, and my voice was a calm I hadn't felt in months. Calm in a moment like that is, I realized, not absence of feeling, but the presence of decision. I told a small story, a condensed version of my childhood with Evelyn's sharing. The way Louise's laugh had always been the soundtrack to my disappearing things. I did it without bile, because bile only makes people defensive, and defensive people make worse choices. I kept it precise. And because my life is not a revolving door, I said, and the last words hung like a neon sign. 2 weeks ago, Danny and I took one step to make sure the things that are ours stay ours. I turned. Danny was already on his feet, the way men in movies used to be on horses, already in motion. He walked up, took the paper from his jacket, crisp, sealed, notarized like a small cannon, and he didn't need to be theatrical. The paper was theater enough. He set it on the podium, and the notary's stamp gleamed like a crest. "There's a legally notarized declaration," he said. "It states the car given to Annie by my parents is hers, and any attempted transfer without her consent triggers consequences spelled out in the document." Evelyn's smile frayed at the edges. Louise's phone froze mid-story. Someone near the bar barked a laugh that sounded like a cough. Danny read the relevant clause out loud, the clause that said any attempt to transfer or otherwise claim the gifted property would be considered an attempted repudiation of Annie's rights and would affect inheritance rights from his family. It was the sort of sentence you don't expect to hear at a wedding reception, and that was the point. The crowd went quiet. You could hear cutlery settle in its grooves. The air in the room shifted from party to tribunal in a breath. The kind of shift that makes people look at their shoes and wonder what their mouths just promised. Evelyn's face pulsed with a dozen colors. She tried to laugh the way people do when they think humor can paper over exposure. "Oh, Annie, it was a joke. Sharing, you know. We always share," she said, the old script, the same one that had gotten mileage for years. "We always shared, which is what makes it stealing." I said. The word felt clinical and necessary. You frame taking something that was given to me as an act of generosity. It was not. It was an attempt to reassign what was given to me. Louise, who had been basking in the applause of strangers, blinked, and then tried a defense that was mostly reflex. But it's family. It's what we do. She stopped because words failed when the law walked into the room wearing a bow. Then something odd happened. The guests split like water around a rock. A few people, my Aunt Claire, my friend Marco, exhaled in relief, as if a window had been opened in a room that had smelled like old secrets. My cousin Ben, who had watched Evelyn's performances for years, asked, quietly but firmly, "Was this ever Annie's to give?" The word no echoed in the room like a verdict. Evelyn sputtered. Louise's cheeks reddened. The band, unsure of its role, resumed a waltz but softer, like a soundtrack for a house that had just had its locks changed. Evelyn tried to pivot. "You made a big deal out of nothing." Her hand trembled now. She was used to directing the narrative, not being read out of it. "It's not a big deal when it happens once," Danny said. "And it's not small when it happens 100 times. This is a line. You crossed it. What I wanted wasn't punitive theater. I wanted clarity. I wanted the decades-long habit of gaslight generosity to end in front of witnesses. So I did something small and human. I told Evelyn that I loved her. And I told her that love didn't mean erasing me to make someone else look good. I told Louise that I wanted her in my life if she could respect the difference between help and taking. I could see the word respect moving slowly through both their faces, like a concept that had to be learned in real time. There was rage. Of course there was. There were people who thought I'd made a spectacle and that we could have handled it privately. There were other people, quieter ones, who later told me that they had been keeping count in their heads for years. There was a cousin who later told me she'd been waiting for me to say the words out loud, who reached across and squeezed my hand when the band struck a chord that meant dancing again. The consequence clause, whatever weight it carried in actual probate court, did something more immediate than change paperwork. It made visible a pattern. It turned something that had felt endless and invisible into a thing with a name. People can tolerate patterns if they're fuzzy. Once you give a pattern an address and a stamp, it's easier to see the seam. After the speeches and the soft blows of embarrassment, something lighter settled over me. Evelyn didn't storm out. Louise didn't throw herself into drama. They sat with the aftertaste of being caught and the awkwardness of family that doesn't know how to change overnight. Later, when the cake was cut, Evelyn stood and made a toast that was short and oddly sincere. "To new things and to doing better," she said. The words were simple and small, but they were said in public. That mattered. As the night waned, the people who loved us danced like someone had given them permission to be themselves without apology. Danny and I twirled badly, fools with a legal document still warm in our hands. I felt absurdly happy, less because I had won anything, and more because I had said no to a life that asked me to accept less as love. On the drive to our hotel, the city lights scrolling by, my phone buzzed with messages. Some angry, some relieved, most surprised. I read them in the dark and felt the odd peace that comes when you stop apologizing for your own edges. Danny reached over and slid his hand into mine, exactly the way he had on the balcony 2 weeks before. "You did it," he whispered. "I stood up," I said, and the difference between the words was small but seismic. A month later, Aunt Claire called me and said, "Boundaries don't destroy families, they define them." She didn't say it like a sermon. She said it like someone telling me something that had finally revealed itself after a long winter. I kept that sentence like a key. In the weeks that followed, there were difficult moments. Awkward holidays, half apologies, a cousin who kept inviting Louise to things as if nothing had shifted. But there were also quiet, sturdy ones. Text messages that asked how I was, an unasked for casserole delivered by a neighbor who had been at the reception, my father finally saying, "I'm proud of you," in a way that meant he'd been listening. Justice, I learned, was not a dramatic headline. It was the small relief of eating cake that was actually yours, of driving a car whose key you did not have to justify, and of sleeping next to someone who would stand up with a piece of paper and a calm voice when you needed it. It was, in the end, a practice. The wedding did not dissolve the family. It rearranged it. Some branches bent, some leaves fell. The tree did not die. We learned new ways to grow. And the sentence that ringed the summer like a small, true coin, boundaries don't destroy families, they define them, stayed with me, warm and sensible as a notary's seal.